It's time to delve deep, bringing in our focus and our feature for the show today. That is dealing with the menace of increasing vulnerability in the financial services sector. The Nigerian banking and financial services sector comprises commercial deposit banks, special investment banks, and community banks. This also includes non-bank institutions or non-bank financial institutions. Undoubtedly, the banking sector embrace of all the digital world has left it more vulnerable to cybercrimes. 2019 report shows the banking industry in Nigeria lost 15.15 billion naira to cybercrimes and forgeries in 2018. This is 539% higher than the 2.37 trillion naira recorded in 2017. Financial institutions, particularly those operating across different jurisdictions, are particularly at risk as online banking, frequent international transactions, new payment systems, and the significant database held by banks provide easy targets and high-profit financiers worldwide. Magazines suggest that more than half of the world's top 50 banking websites have been accessed illegally in the last decade, leading to a loss of more than $1 billion US. Conversations around the world now focus on the need for stronger data protection and security policies to deal with the vulnerabilities of the organizations and better protect consumers. Joining me now via Skype from Lekki to bring more in-depth analysis into this phenomenon and how to build a more robust system to frontally address fraud and cybercrimes in financial services sector is Mr. Patson Bolega. He is the president of the Compliance Institute Nigeria. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now let's start. Okay, go ahead.
It's a pleasure being here.
All right, there. Thank you for your time, too. Now, let's go straight to the issues. During my intro, you see the figures getting more alarming by the day. That's talking about fraud, cyber crimes, and all of that. I'm going to ask this way. What could be responsible for this? It looks like this is thriving one way or the other.
Thank you. Actually, what you just finished narrating is a very clear reflection of our current operating environment. You agree with me that we've seen quite a number of upward swing in unemployment. Youths have been, lying around, not doing much, and we just finished celebrating Youth Day yesterday, and then you can see that a lot of youths don't have work to do. These are all the kind of pressures in the system that drive people to go into crime. But you see, that is the story from your end. The good news is that it's not always that bad the way we see it. The numbers may be showing significant increase in fraud. But if you look at the volume of activities that have been going on in the industry, particularly in the banking industry, compared to the fraud levels, you will agree with me that actually the banks and the financial institutions are really doing a lot to make sure that this scourge of fraud is stemmed. And financial crime typically happens largely because of vulnerabilities found in the system. And for you to ensure that your system is not vulnerable to fraud, you have to put in place certain measures. And I can tell you that a whole lot of institutions globally, including Nigeria, are putting a whole lot of resources in the fight against fraud and cybercrime. As I speak now, we've been told by the McKinsey reports that significant amounts, close to almost $2 billion, are being spent annually by financial institutions in putting in various facilities to fight crime. and fraud in their systems. So it's not just happening. It's happening because of the environment that we find ourselves today.
Talking about our environment and a lot being invested by the banks, indeed, in focus now on the banks, talking about risk management and all of that. So how well are we doing now to be able to checkmate all of this? This affects even our image outside the country. So it means a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely. If you talk about the impact of fraud in the financial system, the first thing that should come to your mind is our reputation and brand equity. We've lost quite a number of that, but you see, we are rubbing it in too hard because sometimes the narrative is such that it makes it look as if the banks actually not doing much. The narrative should actually change towards actually being more helpful to the victims of fraud. We should focus more on how we can make sure that the financial institutions are able to even protect the consumers, the customers, more than going to press with stories of banks. These days, you find a lot of social media criticism of banks. But people get hurt by fraud. But you see, there is also need for us to also encourage the financial institutions to see how they can put in place measures that can even alleviate victims of crime, of these frauds. That is the next level that the banks will go to. But currently, I can tell you that a lot of banks are complying with all the regulations that the regulators have put in place. For example, the Cybercrime Act. The EFCC came up also with a risk-based cyber security framework. And then we also have the recent Data Protection Act, which actually is in line with the global data protection regulation. So all of this put together, you find out that the institutions are not just resting on their oars. They are doing everything to make sure that all vulnerabilities in the system are plugged so fraud does not happen. But you see, the truth of the matter is that fraud has almost now become a way of life in the whole world globally. It is now part of business. So you have to be prepared for it and make provision for it. And unless a business begins to think that way, and if you think you cannot be hacked, irrespective of the kind of controls you put in place, I think you need to wake up, because the hackers will come. So you have to be prepared to make sure that you are not vulnerable when they come. And if they come, you are able to quickly detect and remediate. So one of the things that organizations must do is to have very strong firewall systems. They should ensure that they educate their staff to ensure they understand their roles and their responsibilities as far as security, the system securities in the organizations are concerned. They must create awareness. But you see, at the end of the day, fighting fraud is not one person's business. It's a community business. All hands have to be on deck. Everybody should be involved in the fight against fraud and financial crime. It is just not one organization that will do it. Every key stakeholders, the regulators, the law enforcement, the operators, the customers must all be part of it. Customers, for example, must blow the whistle if they find anything funny at any point in time. This is the best way to go to fight fraud and financial crime.
I'd like you to take us through, Mr. President, now your relationship with the regulatory agencies. I'm talking about the EFCC and maybe others, ICPC. How has it been? How's your relationship been with them? How your members are trying to synergize with all of these agencies? Tell us.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you for that question. Like I told you, fighting fraud and financial crime is not a one-person thing. It must be a community effort. And over the years, the financial institutions, especially the banks, have been in working collaboration with all stakeholders, particularly our regulators and law enforcement agencies. I recall that for us in the banking industry, we have a committee called an association called the Association of Chief Compliance Officers of Banks in Nigeria. We meet every month, and we meet with our regulators and our law enforcement agents every month, sharing ideas, sharing new developments on what is happening out there, which is a key element in the fight against fraud. And again, the central bank and other regulators in the financial industry have also come up, like I said earlier on before, laws, regulations around fraud and how to prevent fraud. Certain laws that are mandatory by banks to put in place are also in place, and we are working hand in hand. So we also have the Nigerian Electronic Fraud Forum, for example, which is well supported by the central bank, working in conjunction with all the stakeholders in the industry, including the telecoms sector of the economy, because largely you find out that beyond the banks, a lot of the other areas that are actually third-party providers that could affect fraud situations in the banks are also there. So you don't just need the banks. You need the telecom sector, for example. You need the switching companies. They all have to be part of this. Needs everybody. So we have actually been meeting from time to time, and we create platforms to always exchange ideas.
Interestingly, I'm now looking at the Compliance Institute of Nigeria itself, reading about you, looking at the anti-money laundering moves and all that you try to do to help secure and block all of these loopholes. Tell us more about what you've been doing to help reposition Nigeria.
Thank you very much. The Compliance Institute Nigeria is a baby of the Association of Chief Compliance Officers of Banks in Nigeria. As far back as in 2007, when we found the need to collaborate more with our regulators and the rest of the industry for the benefit of our customers to fight crime, money laundering, and terrorist financing, we felt we should come up with a small group of people in the form of the Chief Compliance Officers, and we set up what then was known as the Committee of Chief Compliance Officers of Banks in Nigeria, CCCOBIN, now known as the Association of Chief Compliance Officers of Banks in Nigeria. Whilst I was there as the chairman of the committee at some point, we realized that there was not much depth in knowledge. There was a large knowledge gap in understanding financial crimes and how to fight money laundering and terrorist financing. So we didn't have people in the industry, compared to the rest of the world. So we felt we needed to develop something our own here that can start training people to acquire the skills on how to follow the money. That's the way we say it, how to follow the money. And so the idea of the Compliance Institute came up. So in 2015, the Compliance Institute actually went full live. And today we have over 2,000 members cutting across all spectrum of our stakeholders group, the banks, the insurance companies, the pension funds, the stock exchange, the regulators, law enforcement, EFCC, NFIU, and all of them, DSS, they are all members of the Institute. Clearly, our objective is to make sure that we develop people, professionally competent people in the field of compliance to get us ready for even what is ahead of us. Because like the US president said, ain't seen nothing yet, because as we continue to develop our digital and technological skills to improve intermediation in the system, criminals are also thinking of the best ways to use those same systems. So we need to also equip our compliance officers and our risk experts and our anti-fraud experts to be ready for this time. That is why the Compliance Institute has been in place. And so far, we've been admitted recently into the International Federation of Compliance Associations based in South Africa, and we are actually doling out fresh new certifications. We'll be launching our new certification in September, in October. The Association of Compliance Officers ACIN certification. Currently, we issue the Designate Compliance Professional DCP certification for all our compliance officers, and we are looking at making sure that we develop the compliance resources within this country to prepare us for the task ahead in the fight against crime and money laundering. Indeed,
Presidential Institute of Compliance Institute Nigeria, there is a serious challenge ahead. Let's end this interview this way. Let's look at what can really be done. We've talked about this robust system. What robust system are we really looking at? Just like you also alluded to, that when we are trying to build digital platforms, the hackers and all of those guys are also behind, trying to also carve out their own ways to checkmate you. So what are these systems that we need to put in place for us to get to where we're supposed to get to as a country?
Okay, first of all, we have to have, every organization must have a full service, internet service suite that is fortified by firewalls with frequent patches being carried out to mitigate any possible new threats. And we must use very strong passwords in our environment and have a strong password control system and ensure that we keep our softwares updated constantly, manage our social media. If we are linking our systems into the social media, we should make sure that we provide adequate protocols to ensure that our systems are not, hacked into easily. And then we should go beyond the institutions, even to talk about the users, because if you look at it recently, a lot of the frauds happen not because of the institutions that provide services, but largely because of the users. So the users too will need to do something at their own end to make sure that, one, they don't just click anything they see. They should make sure that they only open emails that they know the source, and they should be careful not to ensure that they train all the people in their houses. There have been cases where frauds happen because maybe a child picks up a phone and a fraudster calls him and he gives out the PIN number of his father. So members of the household should also be taught about the vulnerabilities in fraud. And then they must also keep all major passwords saved. You must help protect themselves from identity theft. What I mean by that is that when you go to sites, you must make sure you don't give out all your particulars. If you're on Facebook, make sure you are discreet in providing every information about you, because if you do that, your identity can easily be stolen. And then you must ensure that you keep an eye on all the kind of sites you visit. Not every site is safe. So these are some of the things that the individuals themselves must do. But more overall, after all said and done, the most valuable thing that an organization will do is to continuously create awareness. And that is why today you will see a lot of financial institutions are putting a lot of funds in creating awareness. You see billboards, you see videos being sent all over the place, practically just telling people the do's and don'ts, in the use of the internet systems. So it's good that we all be part of the system. It is not a battle just for the financial institutions or for the organizations, but for every stakeholder.
Mr. Patson Bulega, our President, Compliance Institute Nigeria, thank you very much for your time and for those useful tips you also gave us towards the end of your submission.
Thank you very much for having me.